Hi YouTube, this is a presentation given at the 2014 ALGIM International Conference, so if you didn't catch it there, here we go. This is a talk I'm giving today about optimizing the rubbish and recycling collections in Palmerston North City Council, but rather than give a full presentation, I'm going to try and give more of a story. So it really does begin with me being quite naive and enthusiastic. Operations department were asking if someone could optimize all of their collections so they didn't need to buy another truck, and I just said, yeah, sure, come back tomorrow, I'll have it done. 1 year later, this project has turned into a massive endeavor that's affected about 80% of our city. It's taken over a year and we're still going. But right at the heart of this, and well, the problem, I like this title, is 80,000 residents, 9 trucks, 5 days, 3 materials and 1 maze, because that really does get to the heart of what we're trying to do here. We try to take something abstract and turn it into something real and then solve it mathematically. And the goal here is to rearrange to get spare capacity. We need to keep that in mind. This whole problem does go back to the origins of graph theory, however, and this comes from the 1700s, where the prince of a city named Königsberg stood in the middle of his city and asked his chief mathematician if it's possible for him to cross every bridge in his city, there were 7, and arrive back at the same location without ever crossing the same bridge twice. And it's a conundrum, it's not possible, but it really does get to the heart of graph theory and how we solve this stuff. We don't want to travel our same rubbish and recycling truck down the same street twice, for example. Moving on from the inception of the project, we need to just take a step back and try and get a grasp of the scale of the project. See, down here at the bottom of the screen, I've written up 15, 30, 60 plus. Well, that's because we have 3 different materials to collect, and we collect them across 5 days. So that gives us 15 unique runs. But actually, we work on a 2 weekly cycle in Palmerston North. So we have 30 runs there. But in addition to that, we have multiple trucks going out on any given day, as well as commercial collections. So we're talking about 60 plus unique high density routing problems, and that scale of the problem is actually really big. Now, one of the first challenges was to really quantify what can be quantified and what can't be quantified. And route efficiency, for example, was not possible to quantify what we were currently doing because we didn't know what the most efficient route would be. Urban and rural kilometres, that did lend itself. Also, the number of residents serviced by individual collections. But one of the really striking things about this part of the project was that you try to find out where the trucks go, what happens operationally on a day-to-day basis, and there's no one definitive source of information. You can talk to the operators and they know only a small part of the story. The management know a completely different part of it. No one actually has one nice collection of knowledge. So I started out by just overlaying the GPS data and loading this into GIS. So suddenly we've got this rough idea of exactly where the trucks travel on a weekly basis, and this is the start of getting all of that data into one place to make it the source for operational data. Now, we're using Arcgis to perform this analysis of PNCC, and Arcgis comes with an extension called Network Analyst. This allows us to solve high density routing problems, but this is actually not what it's designed for. So we're doing something a bit unique here, something new. We're deciding to solve not what this is designed for, which is a travelling salesman problem. That's where you have 7 or 8 points and you need the best route around them. Actually, what we have is we have a Chinese postman problem here, and that's where you have anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 points, really, even more if you want. And it presents a few difficulties, such as, instead of saying we need to get most efficiently from here to here, we need to apply rules to this. We need to say, hey, I want to visit every street. I want these trucks to stay to their zone. I only want them to cross the bridge once. I want to reduce the number of right-hand turns. And that's really, really difficult because you can't just say, don't do that to a computer, it will break the entire network. So the approach I've developed here is a cost-based network. So anything is fair game, however, I charge things differently. So if you cross the bridge more than once, I'm going to start charging perhaps 2 hours for that activity. So going back to a numerical time basis is really a good way to get the computer to understand this. A right-hand turn, for example, has become much more expensive than a left-hand turn. U-turns are also very expensive. Leaving the zone in which you're designated, that's very expensive. Even getting down to the point where going to a school between 8 and 9 in the morning becomes quite costly to reduce those trips. So I will go briefly into how this kind of algorithm works. I have tried other algorithms, such as a genetic and an ant colony algorithm. However, Dexter's algorithm is the one that comes built into Arcgis network analyst, and it works really well. This is a brute force solve. So what we're doing is we're taking all of those points and we're calculating them together. And the mechanics of that is, if we take this example, is suppose we want to travel from point A to point D. The computer would calculate from A to E to D, that would be 135 total. From A straight to D, that would be 55, and from A to C to D. In this case, it would select a route from A to C to D because we have a grand total of 50 there as opposed to 55 or 135. Now that's only one destination. We actually compute that across. In my case, I'm typically using 2,000 points to speed it up a bit, but I did originally begin with 28,000 points. So theoretically this works. This is a new method, so we have to test it. And how do we test something that's so difficult to solve in the first place? Well, we take a small chunk and I test it against myself. I used to love doing this stuff, so I just print them out and personally try to solve it. And I have to say that I think I can beat it in most simple cases. I think I can beat it. However, when you start combining the human component and the computer component, I'm not sure I can beat it anymore. This is what I started to do. I took human logic sections that made a lot of sense, put those together, and then just asked the computer to solve these smaller sections, and I started getting fantastic results. So, to prove this work, or even just to display this work more properly, up until this point it's all a theoretical venture in my own head, I made a little animation using Arcgis. I'll just play that for you. Now, the graphics are not very good. I didn't spend very much time on it. The zoom is a bit psychotic, but this is powerful. 2 months after I produced this, the whole project went live. Much too quickly, in fact. This is one of the take-home lessons that I'd like to leave with you at ALGIM, is making your data visible and just displaying it well really does help people understand what you're doing. So if you've got an idea, just try and make it move. Try and put it in an animation, load it up to YouTube, or just show people on your desktop, and you'll get good results. Now in this animation we can just see some of those rules being applied. So we've got a lot of left-hand turns, we've got minimal right-hand turns. For the most part, the trucks are staying to their zones, except for this guy down the bottom here. I'm not sure what he's doing. We've got very few U-turns, and there are some zones in there that the trucks are trying to avoid you can't quite see. So moving on from the theoretical and selling the idea to people, we have to prove statistically, very quickly, in this case, that that what we've done is valid. So you can see here I've just compared the number of old service properties to the new service properties. I've just tried to keep the number between that 3,000 to 4,000 range. There, over on the left there, you can see the old collections. We have some troughs here, and a big peak on Friday too. That was causing us operationally quite a problem. So I just tried to keep that all between the 3,000 and 4,000 range in this new version. We have some variation because I'm accounting for urban and rural kilometers also. Yep. Now, coming back to a big picture at this point, largely we've proved the work theoretically, but this is the time where we get that theory into real world practice. And the first thing you need to do when you address something like this is say, who do we need to contact? Well, in this case, what we need to do is work out which residents have changed collection, and in what type of collection have they changed. Have they changed their day? Have they changed the week? Have they changed the day-week cycle? Have they changed everything? So just generally making a database and getting in touch with people. Now, I wanted initially to send a text message, but apparently we're not allowed to do that yet. So letters, that's kind of like a hobby in local government anyway. So we need to develop a database of people to contact. And actually during this process I managed to discover about 30 properties which were not rated for their recycling, so that's definitely in the benefit category. We also highlighted a number of rural areas that the trucks passed by anyway, so we could expand the service there at no extra cost. Now, here's just an example of a bit of an intricacy in GIS. Is we have a parcel here that's been dissolved, and we have one bin associated with two addresses in this case, so unfortunately we have to send both of these, that is 37 and 39, a letter. Moving on from there, we really need to test, but given I've only been given 2 months to get this entire project live, I really don't have time to get anything installed in the trucks, anything particularly ready, so it looks like I'm going to have to go for paper maps. Nevertheless, I did test OpenStreetMap Android, which is an app I keep coming back to because it's just great. It allows you to upload pre-planned routes, it allows you to go completely offline, download everything beforehand, and then sync when you get back to the depot. So I also tried out the Navit app, which is slightly harder to configure, and I was hacking that on a Raspberry Pi, but I had to conclude that was kind of a dead end. Google Maps in offline mode, it just didn't quite get there, TomTom and a load of others. But as I say, OSM Android was the one I keep coming back to, and more about that later. In an attempt to get everything up and running, I've got a few weeks to go, I just need to get this stuff out. So I've gone for paper maps and sequence maps, so an overview, and this is a real big step forward for those guys, because up until this point the depot staff and operations were going solely by word of mouth and where people seem to be putting their bins out. That causes us so many problems for training, for just general operations, for knowing what actually happens on a day-to-day basis. This at least defines and gives definitive documentation to what happens. So yeah, we have start points, U-turn locations, sequences. The obvious problem here is that when drivers are driving, they don't want to look at maps, so we want eventually to move towards a mobile solution to this. For the moment, this is still a massive step forward. And also overview maps, very helpful. What I've done in the reorganization of the routes is put trucks that collect the same material on the same day next to each other. This actually wasn't happening before just because of the way the city had grown up. So now we have this the ability for these trucks to help each other. In a recent update, I've just changed up some of the colorations, given absolute start locations, made them a bit clearer. I've changed some of the overview boundaries. I've also added in a C block. That's for if one truck gets done early, they know they can just direct the other truck to the C block. And another thing was the adding in the commercial sequences. So for that we really do need tablets. So I've just added in a Samsung Galaxy Note with OpenStreetMaps, actually isn't, as well as a paper overview map here of the most efficient sequence. I'm actually coming back to this at the moment because I'm adding in a tool for using Arcgis Online, allowing them to reorganize and order their stops, then applying my algorithm to it and get an efficient route around their points, and then to upload that. But ultimately, as I say, we want to go to the full mobile solution, and this has been developed by SmartTrack. these are actually some development screenshots from their development team they've sent me. So with any luck this will be in the CADs, but as I say, for the moment we're working on paper maps, and the commercial sequences are using Galaxy Note 3s, which are just attached to the dashboard. I'm getting some really great feedback about it at the moment. And here we come back to an overview. The reason being is at this point we can really claim some kind of success. If you think back to the beginning of this, I said that the goal was to not buy another truck, and actually we've done more. We've actually spared up capacity. We now have one truck available 2 days a week that we need to really reinvest. So one of the things that happened kind of at the same time as all of these changes was a contamination audit down at the recycling plant, which told us that we had about 25% contamination there. So we've chosen to take that spare capacity we've managed to create, that one truck available 2 days a week, and do some recycling education with hotspots. Now to get that we have to get the data. So one of the things that I took a personal interest in was getting all that data that's scattered all over the council, be it in stickers, handwritten notes, Excel spreadsheets. Everyone seemed to have a different way, and just collate it and put it into one GIS spatial location that everyone can see. Ultimately I've had to restrict this to depot staff because it was a bit too popular, but here you go, they can see it. It's available, and we ran this for about a 3-month period, and using hotspot analysis, a bit of Reeducation, this is using Arcgis Online, I managed to reduce that down to 9.8%. So that's a really great result. One of the difficulties with doing something like this is that if you sticker someone's bin saying there's contamination in there, you need more details because people complain, and we also need to be able to respond to complaints in a really timely way. So we stopped that. We're going to be doing another contamination sweep in February. This time we know what to expect, and we're trialing a new app which is Arcgis Collector. This works on OS X and Android apps. You can download it. If you have an organizational account, you should be able to access and use it. Now the plan is to have 2 runners on the streets going around an area checking for contamination in specific zones. They will sticker the bins with contamination, apply the data label here, have a photo taken straight away, and that will sync back to the cloud, be consumed by internal PNCC services, and be made available to call center staff for whenever we have a customer complain about a sticker, for example, on a bin. We'll be able to give them more information very, very quickly, just saying the contamination occurred, it was labelled on this day, it was labelled this type, and here's a picture of it. And we're hoping to be able to resolve a lot of those issues in the next sweeps, and that's going to be in February next year. And finally, I'd just like to talk about some of the main headers for this award, I think, that I'm up for. So project management. From a project management point of view, this has all been about getting data into one place and making stuff happen. So as I said before, this project, all of the different divisions involved would have their own different sources of information. Now I've been trying to get all of that into one place, and that is our GIS viewer. We use a Flex viewer in Council, and just make all of that available at once, keeping everyone on the same page so that when we have meetings, when we have to have discussions about this work, we all are talking about the same thing. That didn't happen before, and that's a really great project management component. The benefit, I think that's probably the easiest part to talk about, is we've had a reduction in the total missed streets. We have a more even distribution and a better coverage. Our customer city networks have managed to reduce their service level agreement with quite significantly, actually, with the depot and operations. Documentation, that's a really big one for us, because now we know where the routes go, where the drivers go, where the fastest ways around these routes are. We can do staff training much more efficiently, and we can also share this with different divisions. I'm actually working at the moment with civil defence, and a lot of this work is very applicable. Also, 15% recycling there. I should say that's 15% less contamination recycling. So that makes everything more efficient, reduces our landfill costs, and makes things smell much less bad down at the depot. Success, as I said, we achieved the primary objective of spare capacity. Obviously there's much more to be done, but we're getting there. And innovation, this is I think the really big one, because we've developed an entirely new method of solving this type of problem, and it seems to be working quite successfully. I'm starting to bridge the gap here between research and the real world, and making things in academia happen in reality, and that's really one of my personal passions. And making data spatial and useful, that in itself is an innovation, because in government we have access to so much data and so little of it is actually used. When data is made spatial, it becomes useful. If you can put it on a map, people can access it quickly. It is no good in a document management system where only a handful of people can access it. And finally, and this is the big one, the mobile technology and syncing to the cloud and uploading that to make it available very, very quickly. This is a really interesting and exciting space, and innovative in that this just would not have been possible 1 year ago. We're on the bleeding edge of making stuff happen with this, and I'm really proud of it. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope to catch you at the ALGIM conference 2014.